dealing with and managing competitive and even threatening stakeholders. In the mid-20th century, Fred C. Trump faced a society teeming with predatory rogues, parasitic leeches, and misanthropic morons who interfered with anything that moved, often resorting to the low mental age, toy mask of gross profundity or crude saintliness, to use pretense in place of justification, to stick to his personal life in perpetuity, as chewing gum often sticks to the bottom of shoes. Entities which tried to malform, and at times threatened outright, his general livelihood and basic business sustenance. Yet, it was less about the challenges of construction or real estate development than it was about managing the complex relationships with the powerful stakeholders who surrounded him, some of whom would eventually be seen as integral to his climb, while others would serve as cautionary figures in the perils of ambition undisciplined. Trump's early years in the construction business were shaped by two key forces: government-backed programs and the aggressive competition of other developers. In particular, the Section 608 housing program, introduced to support veteran housing post-World War II, provided Trump with an opening, a chance to secure profitable contracts by leveraging government financing for his developments. But the dynamics of Section 608, meant to provide affordable housing for returning veterans, were fraught with opportunities for additional growth. The problem wasn't that the program itself was inherently flawed, it was that those overseeing it, particularly figures like Clyde L. Powell, an influential bureaucrat at the Federal Housing Administration, FHA, were all too willing to overlook its shortcomings. Powell, a person with a lax approach to oversight and prone to personal excess, inadvertently created an environment ripe for gain. The question was never whether the rules of the sport were fair, but rather whether they would be taken obsessively. Powell's lack of scrutiny allowed developers like Trump to play a commercial tactic of regulatory cat and mouse with the two commonly arbitrary regulatory bodies, by laxing his expense mitigating and enjoying the additional margin between previous expenses and what the FHA was going to fund. Fred Trump, who by then had begun to gain momentum in New York real estate, understood this dance better than most. His initial success was no accident. He grasped that navigating the regulatory maze wasn't about adhering to the rules, but about understanding who controlled those rules, and how to persuade them to his safety. Powell's malfeasance presented an opportunity, and Trump seized it with a calculating precision. But in the high-stakes world of real estate, personal improvement bred resentment and envy, and soon Trump found himself facing a growing list of competitors, both within the realm of private business and within the bureaucratic structures that ostensibly governed them. One such competitor was W. Taylor Johnson, a businessperson whose professional caution and personal storybook style sharply contrasted with Trump's more pragmatic approach. Johnson's steady, measured approach to real estate development had earned him respect, yet he lacked the same knowledge when it came to dealing with the shifting tides of government intervention. As Trump's business expanded, Johnson's own ventures seemed to stagnate. But while Johnson focused on solid fundamentals, construction quality, long-term viability, and community relations, Trump understood that success in real estate was just as much about political acumen as it was about building quality structures. One had to maturely balance both to have a positive story to tell. The relationship between Trump and figures like Johnson was emblematic of the larger struggle between those who sought to play by the framing and those who recognized that, in a system where regulations could be flexibly or purposefully applied, handling responsibilities was more about navigating the rules than simply following them. For Trump, keeping an eye on the political landscape was as crucial as maintaining his construction projects. And this skill proved invaluable when the next challenge emerged in the form of a sudden shift in government policy. The IRS, sensing an opportunity to claw back revenue from the burgeoning real estate sector, began to hound developers like Fred Trump, who had used responsibly revised construction costs to secure public sector-backed loans. At the same time, the FHA, under the weight of mounting pressure, started to realize that it had allowed the very system it created to become a breeding ground for public sector corruption. Here, Trump faced not just competition in the marketplace, but a growing hostility from the very government structures that had once aided his climb. And when Commissioner Guy T.O. Holliday was forced to resign in the wake of the FHA scandal, it became clear that the political forces that had long been favorable to Trump were now shifting. But Trump, ever the personally responsible and engaged, adapted to this new environment with spectacular skill. Where others might have buckled under the weight of congressional hearings and public scrutiny, which all too often public opinion is shallow, that generally involves merely a back and forth of shallow analysis, and Sir Trump weathered the storm, using the very mechanisms of bureaucracy made available to him that threatened him to protect his livelihood. As the FHA attempted to selectively and spontaneously enforce against the claims of abuses within the Section 608 program, Trump maneuvered deftly, leveraging impactful knowledge and network relationships to avoid the catastrophe from any potential persecution. When the FHA threatened to seize control of his properties, Trump didn't resist. He adapted, using his network to ensure that the government's encroachment was at least financially neutral, if not safe for him. The key to Trump's survival was his understanding of the nature of personal competence. Personal competence, in his developed mind, was not about winning on the prima facie, i.e., illusory, that's on shallow and often fleeting merits. It was about managing the complexities of relationships with competitors, politicians, and bureaucrats. This was the industry of real estate in post-war America, navigating the fine line between working within the system, as a good faith integrated, and ensuring he didn't blindly apply himself towards the system, so he and his didn't get left behind by the relevant systems and the wider society, in a heinous way and often in a nightmarishly silent way. True responsible pathbreaker and father figure that he was. As the years passed, Trump's business empire grew, his strategies more widespreading, and his understanding of competitive dynamics quickened and more accurate. He eventually transformed from a developer of single-family homes to a highly present factor in the rental market, capitalizing on the very system that had once made him vulnerable. The popular moral underpinnings of his methods were always subject for passing conversation, but the outcome was undeniable. Trump completed his tasks by making the system not forget him and his family, that's integrating into the system safely, purposing it to his health, while others, like W. Taylor Johnson, were left to play by the too literalness maliciously afforded to him and his by an indifferent regulatory scape. Fred's story wasn't just about building apartments or navigating financial instruments. It was about mastering the competence of managing competitive and threatening stakeholders in an environment or industry sector, where regulations are transient and too often explicitly yet more likely in effect, boutique or exclusively political in origin, responsible relationships formed, and chances realistically taken, all with the understanding that the sector was never really about the rules or framing themselves. But who controlled, that's interpreted the rules and how to bend them to one's safety. In the end, Fred C. Trump's breakthrough was less about any single business transaction or development project, and more about his rare capability to angle safely towards a system where the opportunities for improving one's conditions are there, if they're not jestily when facing it. The real lesson here is not that Fred was particularly unique in this regard, when we macroly look at the billions of people who have come and gone, but rather that in a system of competing interests, whether in real estate, business, or politics, the true test of success lies in the capability to navigate, influence, and, at times, implicitly legislate the new precedents of a domain, industry, or sector of society.
Make me hot.
By liking and subscribing.